Welcome to Fertility Friendly Food. I'm your host, Stefanie, accredited practicing dietitian and nutritionist and director of the Dietologist, an Australian-based practice focused on optimizing fertility through nutrition. This podcast will bring you snack-size episodes for you to learn, grow, and be inspired by the latest research, facts, and practical lifestyle tips about eating well for optimal fertility, helping you cut through the confusion and myths to take back some of the control on your fertility journey, one bite at a time.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Fertility Friendly Food, the podcast. My name is Stefanie, and I'm an expert fertility dietitian and nutritionist and founder of the Dietologist, a virtual nutrition practice dedicated to all things fertility, reproductive health, and pregnancy nutrition. I'm really excited for today's episode with Tanami Sonter, who is a Sydney-based registered psychologist and founder of Tanami Sonter Psychology. She has a wealth of experience in the psychology field in all different backgrounds, but she has a particular interest in perinatal mental health. So that is mental health concerns that occur before, during, and after pregnancy and associated with that special life stage. And she's also one of our amazing contributors in Fertility 360. Now, you've probably heard me talk a little bit about Fertility 360 in the last few episodes, but this is your last boarding call if you are trying to conceive in the next 3 to 12 months and you want to be prepared with the medical, nutrition, exercise, and psychology knowledge that you wish you had, that you know that high school probably should have taught you about getting started when it comes to trying to conceive or enhancing your conception care, then this 4-week 100% online program is for you. Each week we cover a different fertility and preconception topic. So medical with Dr. Kavya Chiganti, GP obstetrician, nutrition with me, exercise with Courtney Pollock, accredited exercise physiologist, and of course Tanami's module all on mental health. And honestly, there are so many amazing tidbits inside, including an awesome mindfulness recording that you can download and keep and listen to in the car, on the go, at the gym, whenever you need that moment to create a little bit of mindfulness and recentering. I'm really excited to get into this episode where Tanami and I talk a lot about being proactive about mental health, perfectionism when it comes to fertility, and a little bit about her fertility and conception story too. So I'm excited to get into it. So without any further ado, let's welcome Tanami. Just a quick addition from Steph from the future here. During editing, we noticed that Tanami's little baby, you can hear them crying in the background. And we did our best to edit this as much as possible, but it's trickier than it looks. So do forgive us for some very cute background noise, but I know for some of you that might be a little bit of a trigger for you. So I wanted to give you a heads up in case that affects you at all. But it has impeccable timing as Tanami talks a lot about her own journey to pregnancy. So I also felt it was kind of fitting. Anyway, so just a quick heads up. All right, let's actually get into today's episode now. Well, welcome to the podcast, Tanami. So good to chat to you.
Thank you for having me. Very excited to have a chat with you today and talk all things fertility.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you. So for those who don't know who you are and what you do, can you give us a little bit of an intro so our listeners can get to know you a little?
Yep. So I'm a psychologist. I'm working in private practice, and I've been working as a psychologist for around about 7+ years now. And really in the last few years have been narrowing my focus to women's health, perinatal period, and trauma. I've worked in trauma kind of for the longest, so that gets coupled in there all the time. And I'm a new mum myself, so I have pretty recent lived experience with the whole perinatal period and things that come up in that space.
Yes, and that kind of drove your interest in being part of Fertility 360
Yes.
earlier in 2022. So very exciting.
That's right.
So yeah, I'd love for you to maybe touch on a little bit about your journey into parenthood, because everyone's journey is so unique and different, and navigating health information as a parent to be at any stage of, from trying to conceive to pregnancy to postpartum can be really overwhelming. So I'd love for you to, share some real stories and real life insights into this time.
Yeah, for sure. And definitely the information overload can be extreme, especially once you sort of start getting into it and you start doing your own research. There's so much information, it's hard to keep track of. For us, we were pretty lucky in terms of trying to conceive. We felt pregnant pretty quickly. Early on into the conversation of, maybe we'd like to have kids. Next minute, there you go. We were in the thick of it.
Yeah.
So,
but that can be equally overwhelming as, you just kind of starting to make that decision, and then you're like, oh, okay, it's here, it's upon us.
Yeah.
We're obviously always really grateful for, but a lot of my clients can sometimes anticipate that it's going to be a long journey potentially, and then they're almost equally overwhelmed when they get a bit of a surprise that they conceive potentially sometimes sooner than they expect, and that can actually bring up some feelings of anxiety and feeling overwhelmed as well.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as well, you get to a certain age and people start telling you that it's going to take you a really long time. So you sort of plan for it to take a really long time. And then when it doesn't, it's kind of like, oh my God, now what? And for us, there was certainly some of that in the sense that we had the idea, but we're not necessarily, feet on the ground, ready and prepared. And so navigating that information, when you start researching and you start trying to figure out what you're doing, you can sometimes find that there's a lot of information out there. You can drown in the Googling. There's also that well-intentioned yet unsolicited advice that often gets thrown at you, and it can all leave you feeling more anxious and unsure about what you're doing and where you're at than kind of you were when you started. Yeah, and I'm not sure if that's an experience a lot of your listeners may have had or your clients have had as well, but certainly that's things that I've heard in my sessions as well, and from friends and family and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh, yes. There's so much unsolicited advice. And as well, I think, especially on social media, it's almost like as soon as you are thinking about trying to conceive or you're pregnant, all the ads get really targeted at you and you're like, am I taking the right prenatal vitamin? Should I be doing this? Should I be buying this product? And, everybody wants to be a great parent and do the right things by their kid, including before they're born. And so naturally it can be a time where we're really seeking a lot of information, but, we need to have a really good filter as to what is relevant and helpful and, evidence-based information that comes into our space. Well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit about your story, because often I think our listeners are pretty used to hearing about journeys that maybe don't go as planned in terms of long and arduous, and we want to shine a light on all types of conception journeys. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us, Tanami. So as we said, trying to conceive can be both an exciting time but also an anxious time for many people who are trying to grow their family. And as a psychologist, what are some of the most common concerns that you see at this particular life stage? We talked a little bit about information overwhelm, but what other things do you see pop up?
Yeah, certainly a big thing is anxiety about fertility and how long it'll take to get pregnant. So I have a big list of things that often come up, but a key one would be that anxiety and is it going to happen for me, and that worry that I'm going to have difficulty, or I'm at that age where it's really hard, and sometimes even that concern around, have I missed the boat? Sometimes if you have clients that want to have kids but maybe aren't in a relationship. There's a lot of anxiety there around, should I wait? Should I meet someone? Should I go through a donor program? What should I do? So anxiety around fertility and getting pregnant, but there's also a lot of, difficulty maintaining hope whilst trying to be pregnant, and kind of depression can come up in that space. And we also find there's things around body image that can be a concern for people as well. So changes that happen in your body and how you're going to cope with that. Changes that might happen in your relationship. Things like focusing on trying to do everything right, that sort of perfectionistic thinking of like trying to get every step correct, and the anxiety and stress that comes up when we can't always manage and maintain that. But I think it's also important to recognize that sometimes even when you do try and do everything exactly right, things sometimes don't go as you might wish or as you might hope. So I also see, grief with accepting a situation that isn't what you wish for. Which sometimes can come up.
Yeah. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I often think for a lot of, I'm just going to talk about women. I'm a woman, and I see a lot of women clients in this case, and not to say that fertility is just a women's issue. It's much more complex than that. However, I do find that the mental burden a lot of the time is presenting amongst females, and whether males also experience the same level of burden and just aren't talking about it, which we know is common in the mental health space, is a different story. But I find for a lot of women, they have this mentality to fertility health and fertility in general that is very perfectionistic, because they feel like if they dot all the I's, cross all the T's, check every box, then the outcome will come. And certainly doing your due diligence and, making sure you're looking after your body, making sure you're looking after your mind, booking in and seeing your GP, working with an allied health team that's right for you. All those things are going to certainly not be unhelpful for fertility, but none of those things are going to guarantee that you're going to conceive with ease within a certain amount of time and have a healthy, happy baby by the end of it. If it was that straightforward, I would say I'd almost be out of a job. But that isn't the nature of fertility. There is certainly some X factor to it. And I think sometimes it's the first time in somebody's life where they're applying themselves, they're putting in effort, they're ticking the boxes, they're meeting the quote-unquote criteria, but then it's not associated with the achievement and the outcome, and then it's that sense of failure. But then it's not actually failure, because we don't actually have control over every part of that equation that we think we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you're totally right that perfectionistic mentality can be one of the most difficult things to manage, right? Because when you are used to succeeding, when you put in effort, and you're suddenly faced with a challenge that sometimes there's factors outside of your control, and no matter how much effort you put in, you're not going to change the outcome. It's a really tough pill to swallow. And so that is associated with a lot of grief, if that is the case. And it's really quite difficult for us to sort of sit with that. So we need to work with accepting the circumstance as it is, and sort of shifting out of that perfectionistic mindset, because that mindset, it can be quite a trap, really. And we end up taking a burden of responsibility for something that we actually cannot influence any more than we have already tried. And there's that part there where we need to learn to do as much as we can do, but recognize when we have done everything that we can do, that there is nothing more that you can do, and we have to sort of let the chips fall where they may, for want of a better expression.
Yes. I'm often having this conversation. I can think of a particular circumstance recently where I've had to have this exact conversation with a client who's prepared really well in preparation for an IVF cycle, with a history of things, not quite going to plan. But, we went in, looked at nutrition, looked at lifestyle, reviewed lots of different factors, did additional tests with her fertility specialist. We went a whole, new level deeper. And I saw her before her IVF cycle, and I was like, how are you feeling? And I'm like, you feeling good? She's like, I'm feeling really good about all the things that have changed. I'm feeling really happy and good about what we've done, but I still feel really nervous. I'm like, okay, well, that's natural. And I just said to her, if you look back after this IVF cycle, no matter the outcome, if you look back, would you have changed anything? Would you have done anything differently? And if the answer is no, then, you know, that nervous energy is kind of misplaced, but I mean, understandable. But, you know, we can feel at ease that we've done what we can. You sought expert advice this time. Things are slightly different. You know, we're just going to have to wait and see and wait for it to play out. And that is so hard when you are somebody who loves to control all the controllables. And I'm one of those people. So a lot of healthcare professionals are type A personalities. So I know psychologists and dietitians have a lot in common. So it can be much easier said than done. But I think sometimes doing that little time travel experiment of like, go forward in time, look back, what would you have done different? If the answer is nothing, then we're as good as we can get.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a great exercise to do with your clients as well, because, you know, we do tend to sort of blame ourselves or kind of rehash it over and over and over again when things haven't gone how we want them to. But when you can look back and do that kind of time traveling exercise, it really shows you, it allows people to release like that responsibility and kind of let go of the blame that they might be putting on themselves, and the guilt that might come up around that as well, where when you've done everything that you can, then you can finally kind of let it go. And that doesn't mean that you let go of the idea of having a baby or the idea of getting pregnant, but it does mean that you can let go of that burden and responsibility that you're putting on yourself and just let it be and see what happens, which, you know, is a much more comfortable way to go through the conception journey than sort of having to be trying desperately to cling to everything that you can control when, you know, it's actually not true and not realistic.
Yes. And look, we are the first people to say that there's lots of modifiable factors that you can be looking at. But it doesn't mean you need to do 100% of them 100% of the time to achieve a healthy pregnancy and a healthy baby. It's just about one foot in front of the other, start implementing some things. It's a hit and miss, you know. Sometimes you're going to do things really well a lot of the time and sometimes not so much. And I have another previous podcast episode about letting go of perfectionism. So if you're really stuck on this topic, go back and have a listen to that. It's also something we cover inside Fertility 360, one of Tanami's lessons as well, which is excellent. So if you're really stuck on this, I really recommend checking out some additional resources because it's one of the biggest issues that I see in the clinic pretty frequently. So I think it's worth seeking some more advice about. Now, I want to turn to the topic of stress because a lot of people are aware that they should be managing their stress levels when they're trying to conceive. They know it's important to help support their physical and mental well-being, but life can sometimes get in the way. Stresses at work, family life, or even the fertility journey itself. If there's unexpected delays to conception or different road bumps and different medical news that can come up when it comes to fertility journeys can certainly create stress. And it leaves many people feeling a little bit out of control, but then they're stressing about the fact that they're stressed, which is never a good spiral to be in. So what pointers do you have for those who are feeling like they're having a hard time staying on top of their stress levels from a practical perspective?
Yeah, I think this is absolutely one of the biggest things. And I'm glad that you said that there about the fact that stressing about stressing is just this sort of never-ending, totally unhelpful spiral, because that's true. That's what happens. You start getting stressed and then you stress that you're stressed and then it just kind of exacerbates the thing. So my first starting point here is that stress is unavoidable. It's literally going to happen. It's part of life. We can't get away from it. And the good news is that you don't actually have to avoid stress. Stress in and of itself is not so terrible. The key thing is what we do with our stress. So a healthy nervous system fluctuates. It's constantly moving. It's dynamic in response to the demands of our environment. And that's what you actually want from your nervous system. It'll go up, it'll get stressed, and it'll come down. So what we want to focus on is not avoiding stress, but not getting stuck in hyperarousal. So not getting stuck in that really high stress level space and not being able to come back down again. So what that means is we need to make sure that we have ways of letting off steam and releasing pressure and managing our unrealistic expectations of not stressing at all. Because I don't know about you, but I have clients that will come in with like, oh, I had a bad day and now the whole thing's ruined. And
yes,
no.
Yes, I have a non-PG word for that when all that happens. The same thing happens with nutrition. I say it in consults all the time. So if you're a client, you know exactly what's on my mind. But yeah, it's like the throw the baby out with the bathwater. You have one bad day and now the streak is broken. It's not how it works.
No, and so we need to kind of step away from that unrealistic expectation that stress is, you know, we need to avoid it at all costs, because it's not going to happen. It's actually okay to stress. It's okay to have big emotions, but what you need to do is find a way to express them and release them in a kind of healthy and constructive way. So kind of let them out of your system and find a way to come back to a sense of balance. So in terms of doing that, one of the best things to do is find something that you enjoy and do that as a stress relieving activity. So if you hate walking and someone tells you go for a walk to sort of relieve your stress, that's not going to work, because that's going to be another thing to do on your list of things to do. Instead, go dancing if that's something that you love. So just as an example.
That's mine.
Yeah.
Well, it's on the list for right after this podcast. You've got my target audience.
Excellent. So finding a healthy outlet to express, whether that's kind of some type of movement you enjoy, talking to friends, journaling, taking the pressure off yourself. So instead of being fixated on never having a big emotion or never stressing, allow yourself to have those feelings and just get them out. If you need to, you know, talk to someone professionally, you know, talk to a therapist or find a support group. And also remember, I think this one's really important because we all know that stress and conception kind of impact each other, but it's not a simple relationship. It's not like I stress today, therefore I can't conceive this month. It's a lot more complex than that. So if we can acknowledge that the relationship between stress and conception is multifaceted and bidirectional and complex, maybe we can let go of that a little bit and just focus on day by day, making sure that we have ways of letting the stress out of our system.
You know what is one thing that I'm often encouraging clients to do about their stress, because I often find my clients, a lot like me, suffer from overcommitment syndrome, where they've said yes to too many things at work, and maybe they have previous children, and so they're overcommitting to school sports and volunteering at the school and trying to get to 6 different medical appointments for themselves and their family, and then something happens, like they roll their ankle and now they have to go to the physio, and they're like just in absolute, you know, it's almost like it's a crisis mode all day, every week. And I at that point, I'm often like, hey, it sounds like you've got too much on. Like there's too much. Like I'm tired reading this list. I'm exhausted for you. I think we need to draw some boundaries and start saying no to a few things, which might be a lesson that you have yet to learn, but I'm sure you can attest as a new mum, you will need to say no to lots of things when you become a parent. So it's good practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And exactly as you said, you know, kids or not, learning how to say no is really important. And I think it's also, that's almost like an issue of the times in many ways. We live in a society where we're constantly bombarded with stuff and, you know, FOMO, fear of missing out on things. All of this it's kind of like very chaotic and can be quite intense. And so being able to set those boundaries and step away from things to do, whether it's kind of fun social things or whether it's work commitments or whatever, being able to take that step back and really give yourself some time and have that as the biggest thing on your to-do list is critically important. Just full stop, hands down, in life, that's it.
Yeah, I think it stems from so many different things,
absolutely.
like people pleasing and being told we can do everything at once, and like we can do lots of things but like not quite everything.
Yeah.
Like we have capacities within ourselves in terms of energy, resources, time, etc. And also like not every minute of your diary needs to be occupied with
Absolutely.
something. Like, it's okay to have free space. This is I'm really talking to myself here because sometimes I don't take this advice. So like truly don't think that I'm saying this with any more ability to implement what I'm saying than anybody else.
Right.
So yeah, look, it's one of those things where like I think it's a good time to start exercising boundaries if you're not already. And I've certainly seen a lot of clients potentially underestimate how full their plate is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an excellent point.
Now, I know that psychologists really want to make sure that people they work with are looking after their physical health as well. Like we're eating enough, we're drinking enough water, we're moving our body, because we all know that diet and exercise can play an important role in mental health as well, alongside psychological therapies and medical interventions and so on. In your experience, how much of an interplay does mental health and lifestyle have on each other just from being in this space of being a psychologist?
Yeah, no, there's definitely a massive interplay between our kind of physical health, our lifestyle, and our mental health. And I think there's actually been a shift in the field in recent times to step away from the idea of the brain and the body being two entirely separate entities, to recognize how interconnected everything is. And I'm sure you've heard of, no doubt, like the gut-brain connection that everybody is talking about these days, and the heart-brain connection, and of course how our hormones impact our mood and all of this kind of stuff. And I think it's critically important to recognize that, you know, we are one whole human, not just a brain on legs, and our lifestyle and what we do physically is of course going to impact our mental well-being. And because of that relationship, it's something that definitely we advocate as psychologists. You know, movement is one of the biggest things that we suggest our clients to do if someone's feeling down. You know, get out and start moving. Making sure that you're eating properly is really important for your brain health. All of those things critically important to your mental health as well.
Yeah. And I think in particularly the last 5 years, I've noticed a lot of literature is emerging in the mental health arena in terms of nutrition, and it's actually become its own subspecialty almost in dietetics in and of itself, which is really fascinating. I did a little bit of very small amount of work in the mental health space for a little bit. But, you know, one of the biggest trials that was done in Melbourne is called the SMILES trial, and they looked at using the Mediterranean dietary pattern, which many of my listeners will be familiar with. I've talked about in great detail because of all the fertility benefits, but there's also benefits to mental health. And they showed in a group of, I think it was mild to moderately depressed people, that compared to just social support, that the people that were on a dietitian-led and supported Mediterranean diet with plenty of extra virgin olive oil, nuts and seeds, legumes and beans, whole grains, herbs and spices, seafood, eggs, dairy, etc., that actually improved their symptoms of depression significantly. And that is a testament to go to show that at the end of the day, all those neurotransmitters that need to be synthesized have to be made from some kind of basic building block of material. And a lot of those come from our diet.
Absolutely.
And yeah, like you said, the gut-brain axis is incredibly powerful. What happens in your brain, those nervous system signals go to your gut. You can experience changes in the way that you digest food, utilize food, etc., and vice versa. So there is such an interplay here. And yes, we are not a brain on legs, and we're not a uterus and ovaries on legs. And all these systems are integrated. And, you know, we can't ignore one system and overstate another, because just that's not how bodies work. We're much more coordinated and complex than that. So, yeah, I absolutely love talking about that topic, because I think, you know, I never want to say, good nutrition is the only alternative, or exercise the only alternative to, especially very complex mental health needs. It's certainly not true, but it should be an adjunctive therapy, which just means it's added alongside other therapies like seeing a psychologist or seeing your doctor or psychiatrist for medication support if you require it for your mental health. Like, all those things need to be concurrent, which is hard. You've got to build up to that. It's not easy to do all the things all at once. As we were just saying, exactly, layered effect.
As we were just saying. and sometimes it's not necessarily about needing to do all of the things all at once anyway. It's sort of, recognizing that there are little things that you can do in these different domains that will just support you little bit by little bit. It's not about,
no,
all right, you're feeling down, you better run a marathon. It's like, okay, well, maybe if I integrate, an improved diet, that's your area, so we'll leave that with you, and a little bit more movement and a little bit of meditation, or practice my grounding techniques, or whatever it is, my breathing techniques, just these a little bit here and there, regularly is good and starts to make a difference.
I've just recently, not super recently, but in the last few months, I've been trying to build a bit of a journaling practice into my routine. It's something that I've always avoided because I felt like it was a to-do list item and I would feel like this pressure to have to write something down. But I kind of reduced the expectation of myself and I just set a daily reminder on my phone at 7 a.m. It goes off every morning, which is around the time I wake up and have breakfast, and I sit down with my coffee and I just say, write one line. Doesn't matter what it is. There's no judgment. Nobody's reading this. Just write whatever it is. And sometimes I write one line, sometimes I write 2 pages. Just depends. And I think sometimes iteration and embracing the fact that you don't have to be perfect in whatever it is that you're doing. Like, it's there for you and not for anybody else. That's really important. And I see that a lot in the physical health space of like, oh, I don't want to go to the gym because then what will people think of me if I go to the gym and I don't know what I'm doing? Or what if I try cooking and it doesn't work out? It's like, it's okay. It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, try again tomorrow. You're going to eat again. It's all right. So I hope so. Like, please eat again. So like, it's really important that we, sometimes lower the bar slightly. Now, a lot of people that I see feel as though once they're pregnant, all their anxiety about fertility and conception will just abate. But oftentimes I'm seeing that this is just carrying through right into pregnancy and sometimes even further into parenthood, and then worrying about subsequent babies or worrying about, something happening to your baby, like just a high degree of hypervigilance and anxiety around their child or child to be. How important is it that people proactively work on their mental well-being before conception?
Yeah, I think that this is incredibly important, especially if you're the kind of person that does sort of engage in this, again, I'm going to say it, perfectionistic thinking of, if once I'm finally pregnant, then it's all going to be okay. You have a tendency to engage in that type of thinking, then that type of thinking is probably something that you've engaged in for a very long time, not necessarily just in this area, but throughout life. And what we typically find is, again, that is a bar that's constantly moving. So exactly as you described, we have this idea that once I'm pregnant, it's going to be fine. But then once you're pregnant, it's worrying about the pregnancy. Am I going to be able to keep the baby? Am I doing enough kind of movement? Am I eating properly? Am I XYZ? And then once the baby comes, am I caring for the baby perfectly, etc. And so that constantly moving bar is what we can kind of think of as like this perfectionistic fantasy, this idea that eventually I'm going to get to this promised land where I never have to worry again, and it just does not happen. And so that type of thinking is also typically associated with greater mental health difficulties and greater postpartum difficulties as well, because we are putting these really high unrelenting standards on ourselves about getting everything completely right all of the time. So if you know that you tend to fall into this kind of way of thinking, and again, very type A personality style thinking, it's really, really important to start working on that from now and start learning how to change the way that you are relating to yourself. Maybe shift out of that very critical kind of self-talk and learn how to give yourself a little bit more grace and cut yourself a little bit of slack, which will make it a lot easier in quotation marks when it comes to having the baby, going through the process of conception, and just in general, you know, the kind of challenges that we face with motherhood, in life in general.
Yes, I so agree. And I think as well, it's like, I think it's one of the most transformative potentially times for a person, whether it's an individual or if you're in a couple, when you go through this transition into parenthood or trying to become a parent. And I think naturally most people have little bumps in the road, which is to be expected. But I also think that it's just like we work on getting our bodies ready to conceive, and my listeners are pretty across all of that kind of stuff from listening to previous episodes around how important nutrition is and exercise. And we've talked to Court before, and we've talked to Dr. Kavya before about the medical side. And so, you know, we need to pay just as much attention to our brain and our mental well-being, because I often find that those are the roadblocks that actually end up getting mostly in people's way over and above the physical elements. There's so much amazing technology and professionals out there to help you overcome a lot of physical health barriers to conceiving. But if your mental capacity drops because your mental health really suffers, you know, it's going to create a lot more hardship for you to continue and have that hope and persevere towards your goals. So, yeah, I would say be as proactive as you can be on this front, because it's just as critical as your nutrition, your exercise, your medical, all that stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes. So as a Fertility 360 contributor, Tanami, what has been your favourite part of being part of the program?
Oh, it's just been, I think it's been such an amazing privilege to work with the team and bring such a great program to such a large number of people, being able to share that information that is going to be so useful for so many people and reach a large audience the way that we have been able to. And I have to say, I also very much have enjoyed working with the creative side of things, like having that opportunity to sort of develop the slides and do the presentation. It's been such a privilege to work on that with you guys.
Oh, I love it. Well, we have been really honoured to have you as part of the program, part of the team, and we us four like really love, like it's all like a passion project for all of us. Like we
Absolutely.
all have to put extra time and energy outside of our normal day-to-day that we're all doing within our own businesses and practices to be part of the program. But it's so worthwhile when you see so many people take advantage of it. And it's honestly the program that we all wish every single person who was going to start planning for a family could take, and just have these skills, build their toolbox and have those practical strategies ready to go. It makes such a difference to that level of confidence and clarity and calmness heading into your conception journey. So yes, we are honoured to have you, and we're very excited to be bringing it back on the 1st of August. So if you haven't already, be sure to save your spot, because we are starting very soon after this podcast wraps up. So you've only got a few days left to sign up and get inside. Fertility 360 doors will shut July 31st. So Tanami, where can people find out about you and connect with you, either online or offline? We'd love to share all your little connections, and we'll pop them in the show notes as well. But do you want to just give a little shout out to where people can find you?
Sure. So there's my website, and you can get in touch with me. It's tanamisonterpsychology.com. And I guess, put that in the description because my name's a mouthful.
Okay, mine too.
Yeah. And so you can get in touch with me there, organize a consultation, just send me an email and we can kind of book something in. I'm back to work part-time from maternity leave. And there's also my Instagram, which is TS Psychology. It's sort of in development as we speak. We're getting there.
Yes.
And more to come.
One thing at a time, as we discussed.
Yes.
Well, we so appreciate you taking the time from your little one to share your knowledge and expertise with us in the podcast today, and for all your work inside Fertility 360. We're so appreciative. And for everyone who is still listening, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to leave a rating and review, subscribe, and share it with a family member and friend. And don't forget, doors to Fertility 360 are closing on July 31st, and we kick off the 1st of August, and you're going to get a whole week of Tanami all to yourself, including a live Q&A. So be sure to get inside. We can't wait to have you. All right, everyone. Catch you in the next episode. Bye.